Mafia boss's wife ripped the black maid's uniform. His reaction silenced all. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main character. Naomi had always been invisible in the grand mansion. As a maid, she moved through the luxurious rooms like a shadow, never drawing attention to herself. She had grown accustomed to the cold, marble floors, the towering ceilings, and the expensive furniture that surrounded her every day. But today, something felt different. Elizabeth, the wife of Mafia boss Dominic Castellano, had been particularly harsh. Naomi could feel the tension in the air as she stepped into the grand dining room to serve the guests. She had been careful not to make eye contact, knowing the rules. Her role was clear: serve the food, clear the plates, and remain unseen. But as she bent down to collect a plate from the table, she heard Elizabeth's voice. "You." Elizabeth sneered, her tone dripping with disdain. Naomi froze. Her heart pounded in her chest. Elizabeth stood up, her eyes narrowing as she looked Naomi up and down. Without warning, Elizabeth grabbed Naomi's maid uniform and ripped it down the front, the fabric tearing with a loud, cruel sound. The guests at the table gasped, some of them laughing nervously, but most just watched in stunned silence. Naomi's face flushed with humiliation, her breath catching in her throat. She had never felt so small, so exposed. She felt a sting in her chest, but she held back the tears, knowing that showing weakness would only make it worse. She looked down, unable to meet the eyes of the guests or Elizabeth. The room felt suffocating. As Naomi stood there, trying to steady herself, a silence fell over the room. And then, just as quickly, the silence was broken. The door to the dining room opened, and Dominic Castellano stepped inside. The Mafia boss was a towering figure, dressed in his usual dark suit, his sharp features betraying no emotion as he surveyed the room. His eyes swept over the guests, then landed on Naomi, standing there, her uniform torn and her head lowered. For a moment, no one moved. The tension in the air was palpable. Dominic's eyes flashed with something Naomi couldn't read. Without a word, he took a few steps toward Elizabeth, his cold gaze never leaving her. The room held its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Dominic's eyes locked onto Elizabeth, his gaze icy and unwavering. The room seemed to freeze in that moment, the tension so thick it was almost tangible. Naomi stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the eyes of everyone on her, the humiliation settling in, but she couldn't move. Dominic didn't speak at first. His silence was deafening, and Elizabeth shifted uncomfortably, realizing the gravity of the situation. The guests, who had been whispering to each other, fell silent, unsure of what would happen next. Dominic took a step closer to Elizabeth, his expression cold and calculated. Without a single word, he raised his hand, and for a moment, it felt like the entire room held its breath. Elizabeth's face went pale, but she quickly recovered, standing her ground. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice trembling with defiance. Dominic didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the phone on the table and dialed a number with deliberate calm. Naomi stood there, trying to ignore the burning sensation in her chest, the anger bubbling up beneath the surface. She knew Dominic was not the type to tolerate disrespect, but she never imagined he would do anything to defend her. She had always been invisible, a mere servant in the eyes of the Castellano family. The phone call ended, and Dominic's gaze turned back to Naomi. "Go change into something more presentable," he said, his voice calm but firm. Naomi could hardly believe what she was hearing. Change into something more presentable? In her mind, she had already been humiliated beyond repair. But still, she nodded, unsure of what else to do. She turned to leave, but just before she stepped out, Dominic spoke again. "Wait," he said. Naomi paused, turning back to face him. His expression softened just slightly, and for the first time since she had entered the room, she saw a flicker of something. Compassion, maybe? "We'll discuss this later," Dominic added, before turning to Elizabeth. Naomi didn't know what to think. She had expected anger or punishment, but instead, She was being sent away to change. As she made her way to her room, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Dominic had never shown interest in her before. She had never been more than just another maid in his eyes. But now, there was a change in the air, and Naomi wasn't sure if it was a change for the better or something else entirely. She quickly changed into another uniform, trying to regain some composure. She glanced at herself in the mirror, her mind racing with thoughts of what had just happened. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, lost in her own reflection, but eventually, she heard a knock at the door. She opened it to find one of the staff members standing there, a serious look on their face. "Mr. Castellano requests your presence," they said. Naomi's stomach flipped, and she felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. What did he want with her? She followed the staff member back to the dining room, her steps slow and uncertain. When she arrived, she found Dominic sitting at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. The room was quiet, and the guests had long since left. He motioned for her to sit. "Sit," he commanded, his voice calm but firm. Naomi hesitated for a moment before taking a seat across from him. She could feel the weight of his gaze, but she didn't know how to respond. Dominic leaned back in his chair, his eyes studying her intently. "You're probably wondering why I had you leave earlier," he said, his tone softer now. "You've been working here for a while, but I don't think you've ever had anyone stand up for you before. Not like that." Naomi didn't know how to answer. She had never imagined Dominic, the feared Mafia boss, would speak to her like this. But now, sitting across from him, it was hard to believe this was the same man who ruled with an iron fist. "I don't know what to say," Naomi finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to say anything," Dominic said, his voice gentle. "I just want you to understand that I don't tolerate disrespect, not toward anyone under my roof, not even from my own wife." Naomi sat in stunned silence, trying to process what he had just said. Could it be that Dominic Castellano, the ruthless Mafia boss, was genuinely trying to do something right? The thought was almost too surreal to grasp. "Thank you," she said softly, unsure of what else to say. Dominic nodded, his eyes softening. "Don't thank me yet," he said, standing up and walking toward the window. "I'll make sure this doesn't happen again, but you need to understand this. No one is ever going to treat you that way in my presence again." "Understood." Naomi nodded, her heart racing. She didn't know what had just happened, but for the first time since working in the Castellano household, she felt seen, respected. And that feeling, no matter how fleeting, was enough to give her a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Naomi sat in silence, the weight of Dominic's words echoing in her mind. It had been hours since their conversation in the dining room, and she still couldn't quite process what had happened. She had always been just a maid, someone who existed in the background of the Castellano household. But now, for the first time, she felt something different, a sense of respect she had never experienced before. It was a strange feeling, one that made her heart race, but also filled her with uncertainty. As she walked back to her quarters, Naomi couldn't help but replay the events over and over in her head. She had been humiliated earlier that evening, and yet, Dominic had stepped in, defended her in a way she had never imagined. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. But what did it mean? Was it just a gesture of kindness, or something more? She had been working for the Castellano family for years, and never once had Dominic even acknowledged her presence. Now, it seemed like he was treating her differently, but why? Naomi stopped in front of her door, her hand hovering over the handle. She hesitated before pushing it open. Her quarters were modest, the bare minimum for someone in her position, but it had always been enough. She quickly changed into a fresh uniform, her mind still racing. What was she supposed to do now? Dominic had said they would discuss things later, but Naomi had no idea what that would entail. She had been expecting to be reprimanded, perhaps even fired, but instead, Dominic had given her something she never thought she'd receive: dignity. Naomi sat on the edge of her bed, her thoughts consumed by everything that had happened. She had always known that the Castellano family lived by a different set of rules, one that was unspoken and ruthless. But now, she was beginning to see a side of Dominic she had never known existed. It was confusing, to say the least. A soft knock on the door broke her thoughts. She quickly stood up, her heart racing again. "Come in," she called out, her voice steady despite the nerves that were beginning to rise within her. The door opened slowly, and Naomi's stomach flipped when she saw Dominic standing in the doorway. His presence was as commanding as ever, but there was something different in his expression, something almost warm. "Naomi," he said softly, his voice low but firm. "Come with me." She nodded silently, following him down the hallway. As they walked, Naomi couldn't help but notice the contrast between their worlds. Dominic moved with the confidence of a man who owned everything, while she followed behind him, feeling smaller than ever. They reached his study, and Dominic opened the door, gesturing for Naomi to enter. She stepped inside, feeling a mix of nerves and curiosity. The study was grand, the walls lined with books and expensive artwork. It felt like a world away from the small, utilitarian room she called her own. Dominic closed the door behind them, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, but Naomi could feel the tension between them. Finally, Dominic broke the silence. "I want to make sure you understand something," he said, his gaze steady as he looked at her. "What happened earlier tonight, it won't be tolerated. No one will treat you that way again. Not under my roof." Naomi felt a lump form in her throat, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. She had never felt so vulnerable, yet so protected, all at once. She swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Dominic studied her for a moment before speaking again. "You're not just a maid to me, Naomi. You're more than that." Naomi blinked, surprised by his words. She had never imagined he would say something like that. "I want you to know that I appreciate the work you do here," he continued, his voice sincere. "And I want to make sure you're treated with the respect you deserve." Naomi's heart swelled with emotion. She had always known her place in this house, never questioned it, never challenged it. But now, Dominic was offering her something she had never dared to dream of: respect. "I'll make sure you're treated fairly from now on," he added. "But that means you need to trust me." Naomi didn't know how to respond. She had never been asked to trust anyone in her life, certainly not someone like Dominic Castellano. But in that moment, as she looked into his eyes, something shifted. She could see the sincerity in his gaze, and for the first time, Naomi believed him. "I trust you," she said quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty, but also hope. Dominic nodded, his expression softening. "Good," he said simply. "We'll take things one step at a time. But for now, go get some rest. You've earned it." Naomi nodded, still processing everything that had just happened. As she left the study, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. But as she walked back to her quarters, she couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. Naomi woke up the next morning to the soft sound of birds chirping outside her small window. It was a sound she had always found comforting, but today it felt different. It felt like a new beginning. As she got out of bed and dressed in her uniform, she couldn't shake the events of the previous night from her mind. Dominic had treated her with a level of respect she had never expected from someone like him. He was the Mafia boss, the man everyone feared, and yet he had stood up for her in a way no one ever had. It was hard to believe, but it was true. As Naomi entered the kitchen, she found the staff already busy with their usual tasks. The air was filled with the smell of fresh coffee and warm pastries, but Naomi couldn't focus on any of it. Her mind kept drifting back to Dominic's words. "You're not just a maid to me, Naomi. You're more than that." She repeated those words in her head, trying to make sense of them. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. She was always just a maid, a person whose sole purpose was to serve and remain invisible. But now, Dominic's words lingered in her thoughts, making her wonder if there was more to her life than what she had always known. As she made her way to the dining room to prepare for breakfast, Naomi was stopped by one of the staff members, a young woman named Maria. "Naomi," Maria said with a warm smile, "Mr. Castellano has requested to see you in his office." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. She had never been summoned by Dominic before, and the thought of facing him again made her stomach twist in knots. Still, she nodded and made her way down the hallway. When she reached the door to Dominic's office, she hesitated for a moment before knocking softly. "Come in," came his voice from inside. Naomi pushed open the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Dominic was sitting behind his desk, as usual, but today there was something different about his demeanor. He didn't look as cold or distant as he usually did. He looked approachable. "Naomi, please, take a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Naomi sat down slowly, still feeling the weight of the situation. I'm sure you're wondering why I asked to see you, Dominic began, his voice calm and steady. The truth is, I've been thinking a lot about what happened last night. You're a valuable part of this household, and I want to make sure you're treated with the respect you deserve. Naomi blinked, surprised by his words. She had never imagined that the Mafia boss would care about her well-being, let alone acknowledge her worth. I've decided that it's time for a change, Dominic continued. You've been here for a long time, and I think you're ready for more responsibility. Naomi's eyes widened. More responsibility? She repeated, not sure she understood what he meant. Yes, Dominic replied. I want you to take on a more important role in this house. You'll still be helping with the daily duties, but I believe you're capable of more. I want you to oversee some of the other staff members, help with the scheduling, and ensure everything runs smoothly. Naomi's mind raced. She had never imagined that she would be given such an opportunity. It felt like a dream she was too afraid to believe in. Are you sure? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sure, Dominic said, his gaze unwavering. You've earned it, Naomi. And I want you to know that I'm not doing this out of pity. I'm doing this because I believe in you. Naomi felt a lump form in her throat. She had never felt so seen, so valued. It was overwhelming. Thank you, she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. Dominic nodded, his expression softening just slightly. You deserve this, Naomi. Now get to work. We've got a lot to do. As Naomi left his office, she couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was more than just a maid. She felt like she had a future, a purpose beyond the walls of the Castellano mansion. As she walked down the hallway, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Maybe things were changing, not just for her, but for everyone in this house. And for the first time in a long time, Naomi felt hope. She knew that her life was never going to be the same again. Naomi stepped into the main hall of the Castellano mansion the next morning, her heart racing with both excitement and nervousness. The promotion Dominic had offered her felt like a dream, and though it hadn't fully settled in, she was determined to prove herself. She had spent years serving this family in silence, invisible to everyone, but now, for the first time, she felt as if she had a voice, a place. The other staff members greeted her as she passed by, some with surprise, others with curiosity. Naomi had always kept to herself, doing her duties quietly, but now she was stepping into a role where her voice mattered. As she approached the staff office, Maria, the young woman who had informed her of Dominic's request the day before, smiled at her. You're here early, Maria said, her tone friendly. I hear you've been given a new responsibility. Naomi nodded, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. Yes, I've been asked to oversee some of the other staff, she replied, still adjusting to the sound of those words coming from her own mouth. That's amazing, Maria said with a grin. Do great. If you need anything, just let me know. Naomi smiled back, grateful for the support. As she sat down at the desk in the staff office, she could feel the weight of the responsibility settling on her shoulders. The room was filled with schedules, lists, and reminders for the day's tasks, and Naomi quickly began to organize them, making sure everything was in order. The tasks ahead would not be easy, but they were hers to handle now. As the day went on, Naomi found herself making small decisions, assigning tasks to the staff, checking inventory, and ensuring everything was running smoothly. With each task she completed, her confidence grew. The house, which had always been a place of cold luxury, now felt like her domain in a way it never had before. But as the day drew to a close, Naomi couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping in. She had been busy, yes, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She hadn't seen Dominic all day. She had expected him to check in, to see how she was adjusting to her new role, but he hadn't. It was unlike him to be so distant, especially after their conversation the night before. Naomi tried to push the thoughts aside as she finished her duties, but as she prepared to leave for the night, she found herself standing at the door of his office once again. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She didn't want to disturb him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to speak with him. With a deep breath, she knocked softly. Come in, came his voice from inside. Naomi pushed the door open and stepped into the dimly lit room. Dominic was seated at his desk, a few papers scattered in front of him. When he saw her, he motioned for her to sit, his expression unreadable. "Naomi," he said, his tone calm. "I wanted to check in. How is everything going?" Naomi sat down, her heart still pounding in her chest. "It's going well, Mr. Castellano. I've been keeping busy, and everything seems to be running smoothly." Dominic nodded, his eyes studying her. "I'm glad to hear that. You've done well so far." Naomi felt a sense of relief wash over her, but it was quickly replaced with the same uncertainty that had lingered. "All day. Is everything okay?" she asked before she could stop herself. Dominic raised an eyebrow, surprised by the question. "Of course. Why do you ask?" Naomi hesitated, unsure of how to put her feelings into words. "It's just, I haven't seen you all day. I expected you to check in, to make sure everything was okay." Dominic looked at her for a moment, then leaned back in his chair, his gaze softening. "I trust you, Naomi. That's why I gave you this responsibility. You don't need to worry about me checking in. I know you'll handle things." Naomi nodded, but the unease in her chest didn't go away. "Thank you," she said softly. Dominic stood up from his desk and walked toward her, his presence filling the room. "You're doing great. Don't doubt yourself," he said, his voice firm yet gentle. Naomi swallowed hard, her thoughts swirling. She had never imagined that she would have this kind of relationship with Dominic Castellano, the man who ruled with such authority. And yet, here she was, sitting in his office, discussing her role in his household. It was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. As Naomi left his office, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had a long road ahead of her, but for the first time, she wasn't just surviving in the Castellano mansion. She was becoming a part of it. And that was a feeling she never thought she would experience. Naomi woke up the next morning feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The day ahead was a big one, her first day fully in charge of overseeing the staff. She had slept restlessly, thinking about everything that had changed in such a short amount of time. The Castellano mansion, once just a place where she worked in the shadows, now felt like something she had a stake in. The responsibility that had been placed on her shoulders wasn't something she had expected, but she was determined to succeed. As she made her way to the kitchen to start her day, she found the usual bustle of the staff already in full swing. Maria was at the counter, preparing the morning coffee, while the others were setting the table for breakfast. Naomi took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and stepped forward to begin her first task. "Good morning, Naomi," Maria greeted with a smile, noticing. Her confidence dried. Naomi smiled back, though her nerves were still present. "Good morning, Maria," she replied. "I'm just checking in to make sure everything is on schedule." Maria nodded and handed Naomi a schedule for the day. "Everything looks good. You're in charge now, Naomi. Let us know if you need anything." Naomi glanced at the schedule, noting that she had to ensure the household's needs were met while also supervising the others. As she walked through the mansion, overseeing the daily tasks, she couldn't help but notice how different it felt now that she was the one calling the shots. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was an integral part of the household's daily functioning. Later in the morning, Naomi was summoned to the study. She felt her heart race again. It was the same room where she had sat just days ago, talking with Dominic about her new responsibilities. She had no idea what to expect this time, but she walked in with a sense of purpose. "Naomi, come in," Dominic's voice called from behind his desk. He looked up from a set of papers and gestured for her to sit. "I just wanted to make sure everything is going well," he said, his voice calm and steady. Naomi took a seat across from him, feeling a bit more at ease this time. "Everything is going smoothly so far, Mr. Castellano," she replied. "I've been working with the staff to ensure everything runs on schedule." Dominic nodded thoughtfully, his eyes scanning her face. "Good. I trust you've made the adjustments you need to." Naomi nodded, though she couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. "Yes, but there's a lot to manage," she admitted. "I'm still getting used to being in charge of so much." Dominic's expression softened slightly. "It's a big responsibility, but I have faith in you, Naomi. You've shown you're capable. Keep doing what you're doing." Naomi felt a sense of pride swell within her at his words. She had always been invisible to him, but now, he was acknowledging her efforts. "Thank you, Mr. Castellano," she said quietly. "I won't let you down." Dominic smiled, though it was brief. "I know you won't. Just remember, if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'm always here." Naomi left the study, her heart lifting a little with each step. It was clear that Dominic trusted her, and that trust meant everything. She had always dreamed of being more than just a maid, and now she was beginning to see that dream come true. As the days passed, Naomi continued to oversee the staff with a newfound sense of confidence. She quickly gained respect from the other employees, who had once seen her as just another member of the help. Now, they came to her for guidance, and she provided it with a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed. It wasn't easy, but with each passing day, Naomi felt more and more in control of her own future. She had always known she was capable of more, but it took Dominic's faith in her to realize just how much she could achieve. And as she moved forward, Naomi couldn't help but wonder what other opportunities might lie ahead for her in the Castellano household. She was no longer just a maid. She was a woman with purpose, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. Naomi had now settled into her new role within the Castellano household. What had once seemed like an impossible transition was becoming her reality. Each day, she stepped into her duties with more confidence, and the respect she had gained from the other staff made her feel like she was truly a part of something larger. But even as she thrived in her position, she could not shake the nagging sense of uncertainty. There were moments when she would catch a glimpse of herself in the reflection of the mansion's grand mirrors, wondering how she had gone from being the quiet maid in the background to being the one who called the shots. Was she truly capable of all this? She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the work at hand. One morning, as Naomi was walking through the hallway, checking in on the staff, she was approached by one of the housekeepers, Maria. "Naomi, Mr. Castellano has requested your presence in his office," Maria said with a warm smile. Naomi's heart skipped a beat. She had grown accustomed to being summoned by Dominic, but each time still sent a wave of nervous anticipation through her. She nodded and made her way to his office, trying to steady her breath. When she reached the door, she knocked softly. "Come in," came Dominic's voice from inside. She opened the door and stepped in, finding him standing near the window, his back to her. His posture was still commanding, but today, there was a sense of ease about him that Naomi hadn't seen before. He turned around as she entered, a slight smile on his face. "Good morning, Naomi," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "Good morning, Mr. Castellano," Naomi replied, her nerves making her voice sound quieter than usual. Dominic nodded toward the chair in front of his desk. "Please sit," he said. Naomi took a seat, her mind racing. She could feel the tension between them. There was something unspoken hanging in the air. Dominic seemed to sense her unease. He walked around his desk and leaned against the edge, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "You've been doing great," he began. "I've been watching how you handle things, and I have to say, I'm impressed." Naomi felt a rush of pride at his words. She had worked so hard to prove herself, and hearing that Dominic was noticing meant everything to her. "Thank you," she said softly, not sure what else to say. Dominic studied her for a moment before continuing. "I wanted to talk to you about something important," he said, his tone serious now. Naomi's heart raced. "Of course," she replied, trying to keep her composure. Dominic paused for a moment, as though choosing his words carefully. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," he said slowly. "About the direction this household is heading. And I believe you're someone who can help guide us there." Naomi blinked, unsure if she understood what he meant. "What do you mean, Mr. Castellano?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Naomi saw a glimpse of something more, something deeper than just the businessman he portrayed to the world. "I'm giving you more responsibility," he said, his voice steady. "I want you to take on a more strategic role. You'll work directly with me to help manage the household operations, and I want your input on how we can improve things." Naomi's breath caught in her throat. More responsibility? A role working directly with Dominic himself? She had never imagined such an opportunity. She had only just started to gain confidence in her new position, and now, it seemed like everything was shifting. Once again, "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I mean, I'm still learning." Dominic's expression softened. "You're not just learning, Naomi. You're leading. I see that now." Naomi didn't know what to say. She had always doubted herself, always wondered if she was truly capable of being more than just the maid. But now, it seemed as though Dominic was giving her a chance to prove herself, to show that she could be more than what she had always been. I won't let you down, she finally said, her voice steady with determination. Dominic smiled, his gaze filled with something like pride. I know you won't, he said. I'm counting on you, Naomi. Naomi left his office that day with a mix of emotions. She felt a rush of excitement, but also the weight of the responsibility Dominic had just given her. She had always dreamed of being more than just a servant, but now she was standing at the threshold of something greater. As she walked down the hallway, she couldn't help but feel like everything was about to change. She had always been afraid to step into the light, but now, it seemed like the light was waiting for her to take the next step. Naomi's days were now filled with new challenges, each one more demanding than the last. As she took on more responsibility, she felt the weight of her position within the Castellano household growing heavier. The staff looked to her for guidance, and she could no longer hide in the background. She was becoming a leader, a position she had never imagined for herself. The change had come so suddenly, and yet, Naomi was beginning to embrace it. She felt a sense of pride each time she walked through the halls of the mansion, a place that had once felt so foreign to her. Now, it was hers to manage. But with the newfound authority came moments of doubt. Every decision she made seemed to carry more weight, and she was constantly second-guessing herself. She would sometimes catch herself wondering if she was truly qualified to handle it all. Was she capable of leading this household, or was she just pretending to be something she wasn't? One evening, as she was reviewing the staff schedule, Naomi heard a soft knock at the door. She looked up to see one of the housekeepers. Standing in the doorway, Naomi, Mr. Castellano would like to see you in his office, the housekeeper said. Naomi's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen Dominic all day, and the thought of meeting with him always made her nervous, even though he had been nothing but supportive. She stood up and smoothed down her uniform, trying to compose herself before walking down the hallway to his office. When she arrived, she knocked softly, and Dominic's voice called out, "Come in." She opened the door and stepped inside. Dominic was sitting behind his desk, looking over some papers. He looked up when she entered, his eyes scanning her face before he gestured to the chair across from him. "Naomi, please sit," he said. Naomi sat down, her hands clasped in her lap. She had no idea why he had called her in, but she could sense that it was important. Dominic set his papers aside and leaned back in his chair. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice calm but serious. "You've been doing a great job with the staff, but I think it's time we talk about something else." Naomi's stomach tightened. She couldn't tell if this was a good thing or a bad thing. "What is it, Mr. Castellano?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Dominic met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I want you to take on even more responsibility," he said. Naomi blinked, surprised by the request. "More responsibility?" she repeated, not sure if she understood. "Yes," Dominic replied. "You've earned my trust, and I think you're ready for a bigger role." He paused for a moment, studying her. "I want you to help me manage the family business. Not just the household, but everything. You'll be involved in some of the decision-making processes, helping me with some of the more important matters that come up." Naomi's breath caught in her throat. She had never imagined being involved in the Castellano family's business dealings. The thought of it was both thrilling and terrifying. I don't know if I'm ready for that," Naomi said quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. Dominic's gaze softened slightly. "I understand that it's a lot to take in, but I wouldn't offer this to you if I didn't believe you were ready. You've proven yourself, Naomi. You're more than just a maid. You're capable of so much more." Naomi sat in silence, trying to process what he had just said. She had always been afraid to step out of her comfort zone, always doubted her abilities. But now, Dominic was offering her a chance to prove herself in a way she never thought possible. "I don't want to rush you into anything," Dominic continued, his voice gentle. "But I need someone I can rely on, someone who can help me run things smoothly. And I believe that person is you." Naomi felt a mixture of emotions welling up inside her. Fear, excitement, doubt, all of it swirling within her. She had never imagined being a part of the family's business, but now, the opportunity was right in front of her. Could she really take on such a role? "I'll do my best," Naomi said finally, her voice trembling with both excitement and uncertainty. Dominic smiled, a rare warmth in his expression. "I know you will," he said. "I have no doubt about that." Naomi left Dominic's office that day with a heavy heart and a mind full of questions. The opportunity he had offered her was one she had never expected, and now, she found herself standing at a crossroads. What did this mean for her future? And more importantly, what did it mean for her relationship with Dominic? She had always seen him as the powerful Mafia boss, the one who made the decisions. But now, he was giving her a chance to share in that power, to be part of something much larger than herself. As Naomi walked back to her quarters, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: everything was about to change. Naomi stood in front of her mirror that evening, staring at her reflection. The woman she saw there was not the same woman who had walked into the Castellano mansion months ago. She had changed in ways she had never expected, and the transformation felt both empowering and overwhelming. As she touched the fabric of her uniform, her mind replayed the conversation with Dominic. The weight of the new responsibility he had placed on her shoulders felt heavy, but it also filled her with a sense of purpose. She was no longer just the maid, the woman who cleaned the floors and served the family. Now she was someone who was trusted to help manage the very household she had once only observed from the sidelines. The enormity of it all was starting to sink in. Naomi had always felt invisible, like a shadow in the background. But now, as the days passed and she took on more duties, she felt herself standing taller, her confidence growing. Yet there were moments when she still questioned herself. Could she really handle this? Was she truly capable of the things Dominic believed she could do? The thought of managing the family business alongside Dominic was both terrifying and exhilarating. She had spent so many years being overlooked that the idea of being seen, truly seen, was both foreign and enticing. As she walked down the hall to the staff office the following day, her mind was racing with thoughts of what was to come. She had a new task awaiting her, something important that Dominic had asked her to oversee. When she entered the office, the staff was already gathered around, waiting for her instructions. They looked at her with a new sense of respect, and Naomi felt her nerves kick in once again. It wasn't just about managing schedules or overseeing chores anymore. She was now responsible for ensuring that everything ran smoothly, from the smallest detail to the most important matters. She could feel the eyes of the staff on her as they waited for her direction. It was a reminder that she was no longer just a background figure, but someone whose decisions mattered. Naomi took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "All right," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Let's go over the plans for the week. We've got a lot to get done." As she spoke, she felt the familiar tension in her chest begin to ease. She wasn't just following orders anymore, she was giving them. And as the staff began to follow her direction, Naomi felt a surge of pride. She was beginning to trust herself, to believe that she was capable of this new role. That afternoon, as she finished checking the staff's progress, she was summoned once again to Dominic's office. This time, she felt less nervous. She had already proven herself to be capable, and she knew that she could handle whatever he had to say. When she entered, Dominic was sitting at his desk, reviewing some documents. He looked up as she entered and motioned for her to sit. "Naomi, how is everything going?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. Naomi sat down, her hands resting in her lap. "Everything is going well, Mr. Castellano. The staff is working well together, and we're staying on schedule." Dominic nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "I've been keeping an eye on how things are going, and I have to say, I'm impressed with your progress." Naomi felt a warm feeling spread through her chest at his words. She had worked so hard, and hearing him acknowledge her efforts meant more than she could express. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm just doing my best." Dominic's expression softened slightly. "I know you are, and I appreciate it. You've proven that you're more than capable of handling this. I want you to know that you've earned my trust." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. Dominic's trust was not something she had ever expected to receive, especially after all the years of feeling invisible. "Thank you," she said quietly, feeling the weight of his words settle deep within her. Dominic leaned back in his chair and looked at her intently. "You've got a bright future ahead of you, Naomi," he said, his voice sincere. "Keep going like this, and I'll be able to count on you in ways I never thought possible." Naomi felt her breath catch in her throat. The words she had longed to hear had finally come, but now they felt like a promise, one that she had to live up to. She nodded, her voice steady. "I won't let you down," she said, her determination stronger than ever. As she left Dominic's office, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that everything was beginning to change. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was someone who mattered, someone who was being trusted with something important. And for the first time in her life, Naomi felt like she had a place in this world, one that she had earned, and one that she would fight to keep.